He was a pillar of his community, a Boy Scout leader, a church council president, a husband, and a father of two. But for 30 years, Dennis Rader harboured a monstrous secret. To the world, he was a quiet family man. To his victims, he was the sadistic monster who called himself BTK, bind, torture, kill. For 3 decades, a faceless predator haunted Wichita, Kansas, a phantom who stalked, tortured and murdered, leaving a trail of terror that baffled investigators. He wasn't just a killer, he was a performer who craved the spotlight, taunting the police and media with letters, poems and grisly souvenirs of his crimes. He gave himself the name that would become synonymous with fear, BTK. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished, leaving a cold case that would haunt a generation. But the monster wasn't gone. He was just waiting, living a life of startling normalcy until his insatiable ego demanded an encore. This is the story of his terrifying double life and the arrogant mistake that brought his reign of terror to an end. To understand the horror of the BTK killer, you first have to understand the ordinary mask he wore. Dennis Rader was, by all outward appearances, the very picture of a middle-class American. He was married for over 30 years to his wife Paula, and together they raised a son and a daughter in the quiet Wichita suburb of Park City. He was a Cub Scout leader trusted to mentor young boys. He was also an active and respected member of the Christ Lutheran Church, eventually being elected president of the church council. Professionally, Rader built a life that seemed completely conventional. He served 4 years in the US Air Force. After that, he held a series of steady jobs. For 14 years he worked for ADT Security Services, installing the very alarm systems designed to protect families from intruders like himself. The irony is chilling. The man citizens hired to keep them safe was the monster they feared. In 1991, he became a compliance officer for Park City, a local government job where he was known for being a stickler for rules, meticulously measuring lawns and dealing with stray animals. To most neighbours, he was just Dennis, a regular guy, while some would later recall him as being overly strict or controlling. No one pegged him as a monster. His own family was oblivious. His daughter, Terry Rawson, would later describe a loving, if sometimes strict, father. The shock of his arrest was profound because this wasn't a disguise, it was a life. He had so perfectly compartmentalised his existence that the family man and the sadistic killer coexisted for 30 years. He wasn't a drifter or a social outcast. He was embedded in the very heart of the community he terrorised, which is what makes him one of the most unsettling figures in true crime history. Beneath the placid surface of suburban life, a dark river of fantasy had been flowing since Rader was a boy. Born on March 9, 1945 and raised in Wichita, he harboured disturbing and violent sexual fantasies from a young age. He was obsessed with trapping and torturing helpless women. According to his own confessions, these weren't just daydreams. He later described engaging in zoosadism, the torture of small animals, a common precursor for serial killers. He also developed a fetish for women's underwear, which became a signature element of his crimes. He would steal lingerie for use in elaborate autoerotic rituals, binding himself while fantasizing about his future victims. These were the private rehearsals for a future of unimaginable violence. His parents, who both worked long hours, were reportedly unaware of their son's secret world, where his need for domination was growing uncontrollably. After a brief stint in college, Rader joined the Air Force in 1966. When he returned to Wichita 4 years later, the fantasies didn't stop. They intensified, waiting for the moment when the pressure of his ordinary life would crack and the monster he called Factor X would demand to be set free. That moment was fast approaching. January 15, 1974. On a cold winter morning in Wichita, the dam separating Dennis Rader's fantasy from reality finally broke. This was the day he would begin his first project, the term he used for his meticulously planned murders. His targets were the Otero family, 38-year-old Joseph, 33-year-old Julie, and two of their children, 9-year-old Joseph Jr. and 11-year-old Josephine. Rader had stalked the family for weeks, learning their routines. That morning, he cut their phone line and tricked his way into their home. What followed was an act of shocking brutality. "The whole family just panicked on me," he would later recount with chilling detachment. He herded them into a room and began his ritual. He bound Joseph and Julie and strangled them. He then took their two children to separate rooms. He put a plastic bag over Joseph Jr.'s head. For 11-year-old Josephine, her last moments were filled with unimaginable terror, as Rader hanged her from a pipe in the basement. He would later confess to having a sexual climax as she died. When it was over, he collected a memento and calmly left. The bodies were discovered later that day by the family's three older children returning from school. Wichita had never seen anything like it. This wasn't a crime of passion or robbery gone wrong. It was methodical, ritualistic, and sadistic. The city was in shock, unaware that this was just the beginning. The killer, meanwhile, went home to his wife. The double life had begun. For months, the Otero murders remained a horrifying unsolved mystery, but the killer wasn't content to stay in the shadows. His profound narcissism demanded recognition. In October 1974, 9 months after the Otero massacre, a letter arrived at the Wichita Eagle newspaper, tucked inside a book in the public library. The crudely written note was a direct taunt to the police, a claim of ownership for his horrific work. The letter contained details about the Otero crime scene that only the killer could have known, and in it, he gave himself the moniker that would forever be seared into the public consciousness. He wrote about his need to bind them, torture them, kill them. He signed off with the initials BTK. It was a declaration. He wasn't just some random murderer, he was a brand, an entity of his own creation. He even suggested other names like the BTK Strangler or the Wichita Hangman, revealing a desperate craving for an identity larger than his own ordinary existence. This letter marked a pivotal shift. The police were no longer hunting a nameless ghoul. They were in a cat-and-mouse game with a killer who was intelligent, arrogant, and talking directly to them. He was playing a game, and the city of Wichita was his chessboard. The terror now had a name. With the birth of BTK, Dennis Rader's reign of terror escalated. He saw his murders as projects, and he kept a list of potential hits. His next known attack came on April the 4th, 1974, though it wouldn't be linked to BTK for some time. He broke into the home of 21-year-old Catherine Bright. A struggle ensued, and Catherine's brother Kevin was shot but miraculously survived. Catherine wasn't so lucky. Rader, frustrated that strangulation wasn't working, stabbed her to death. Kevin Bright's survival was a rare mistake, but his severe injuries left him unable to provide a clear description of his attacker. 3 years passed, then, on March 17, 1977, BTK struck again. His victim was 24-year-old Shirley Vian. He forced his way into her home, where her 3 young children were present. In a bizarre twisted display, Rader locked the children in the bathroom with some toys to keep them occupied before he murdered their mother. He strangled Shirley Vian and left, leaving her children to be discovered later, physically unharmed but forever scarred. Later that year, on December the 8th, he murdered 25-year-old Nancy Fox. He had stalked her, even checking mail to learn her name. After strangling her with a pair of stockings, Rader did something unprecedented. He used her phone to call the police and calmly report his own crime. His voice captured on that recording would be broadcast over the city for years, a haunting audio signature of the Phantom Killer. With each murder, he took trophies, personal items, and most importantly, photographs, to fuel his private fantasies between attacks. The city was living in fear, terrified they could be BTK's next project. After a series of communications in the late 1970s, BTK fell publicly silent. The letters stopped. As far as anyone knew, so did the killings. For years, Wichita wondered what happened to BTK. Had he died? Was he in prison? Or had he simply stopped? The case grew cold, evolving into one of America's most infamous unsolved mysteries. A special task force nicknamed the Ghostbusters hunted for the Phantom Killer, but the leads dried up. But Dennis Rader wasn't dead or in prison. He was hiding in plain sight, busy living his other life. He was raising his children, serving as a Boy Scout leader, and climbing the ranks at his church. In 1979, he even graduated from Wichita State University with a bachelor's degree in administration of justice. He hadn't stopped killing entirely, a fact unknown to police at the time. He murdered his neighbour Marine Hedge in 1985, Vicky Weigel in 1986, and his final known victim, Dolores Davis, in 1991. But since these murders weren't followed by his signature taunting letters, they weren't immediately connected to BTK. In the long gaps between, he relived his crimes through the trophies and photos he had collected, and engaged in elaborate rituals of autoerotic asphyxiation. To the world, Dennis Rader was a rule-following city employee. In private, the monster was merely sleeping, waiting for his ego to demand he wake up and take a bow. For over a decade, the ghost of BTK remained silent. Then, in March 2004, the monster decided it was time for a curtain call. The likely catalyst was an article in the Wichita Eagle, marking the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, which speculated that the killer was long dead or forgotten. For a narcissist like Dennis Rader, being forgotten was a fate worse than death. He sent a package to the Wichita Eagle. Inside was a chilling message from the past. A photocopy of Vicky Weigel's driver's license, murdered back in 1986, and Polaroid photos of her body. The message was terrifyingly clear. BTK was back. Wichita was thrown back into a state of panic. The dormant monster had reawakened, and he was more brazen than ever. A flood of new communications followed. Puzzles, poems, and packages sent to local media and police. One package contained a doll, bound and gagged. In a disturbing recreation of his crimes, he sent chapters of his autobiography, which he titled The BTK Story, eager for the world to know the mind of the master. He was orchestrating his own legend, reveling in the renewed fear and attention. He felt invincible, but in his arrogance, Rader was about to make a critical and ultimately fatal miscalculation. Dennis Rader believed he was smarter than everyone. He had outwitted law enforcement for 3 decades, and now he wanted to use modern technology to continue his game. It was an assumption that would be his undoing. In one communication, he posed a question to the police, a question born of pure hubris. Through a note, he asked, "Can I communicate with Floppy and not be traced to a computer? Be honest." The investigators, led by Lieutenant Ken Landwehr, saw their opening. They decided to lie, playing his own game against him. They placed a classified ad in the newspaper, just as Rader had instructed, with the simple code phrase, "Rex, it will be okay." They were assuring the killer that a floppy disk was a safe way to communicate. Rader took the bait. He sent his next message in a purple floppy disk to a local TV station. He thought he was being clever, but he had no idea about metadata. To digital forensic experts, the disk was a goldmine. Buried in a deleted Word document was a digital ghost. The metadata revealed the document had last been modified by a user named Dennis at the Christ Lutheran Church. For 30 years, police had hunted a phantom. Now they had a name and a location. This lead, combined with other evidence, started to close the net. Detectives knew a Dennis Rader was president of the church council. They drove by his house and saw a black Jeep Cherokee, the same type of vehicle seen on security footage dropping off one of his earlier packages. The arrogant master of manipulation had been brought down by his own ego and a piece of outdated technology. With the floppy disk providing the crucial link, the investigation moved with lightning speed. The name Dennis and the Christ Lutheran Church pointed directly at Dennis Rader, but police needed one final, irrefutable piece of evidence: DNA. The BTK killer had left his biological signature at several crime scenes. To get a comparison sample from Rader without tipping him off, they devised a plan. Investigators learned that Rader's daughter Kerry had a pap smear years earlier at a university medical clinic. They obtained a court order for those records and were able to extract a DNA sample from the lab specimen. The results came back. The lab confirmed a familial match between the DNA from his daughter and the DNA from the BTK crime scenes. It proved beyond any doubt that the killer was Kerry Rawson's father. On February 25, 2005, the 30-year-old reign of terror came to an abrupt end. Police cruisers surrounded Dennis Rader in his car during his lunch break. There was no chase, no shootout. The man who terrorised a city for a generation was arrested without incident. A detective approached his window and said the words Wichita had been waiting 3 decades to hear. "Mr. Rader, you are under arrest." The monster who called himself BTK was finally in custody. The news stunned the community. The church leader, the family man, was a sadistic killer who had haunted their lives for so long. The mask was off. What happened next in the interrogation room was perhaps more chilling than the crimes themselves. Cornered, Rader didn't deny a thing. Over more than 30 hours of questioning, he confessed to everything, without a shred of remorse or empathy. He spoke of his 10 murders in a calm, flat tone, as if he were describing a series of home improvement jobs. He called his victims projects. He recounted the gruesome details of each killing with unnerving clarity and a disturbing pride in his meticulous planning. To the seasoned detectives in the room, it was a stunning display of pure psychopathy. He showed no sadness for the lives he destroyed, only a narcissistic fascination with his own cleverness, and a sense of betrayal that the police had lied to him about the floppy disk. "How come you lied to me?" he reportedly asked an investigator, genuinely perplexed that they would use deception to catch him. His confession laid bare the twisted inner working of his mind. A world driven by violent sexual fantasy, a need for absolute control, and an insatiable hunger for attention. On June the 27th, 2005, Dennis Rader pleaded guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. Because his crimes were committed before Kansas reinstated the death penalty, he was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, a minimum of 175 years without parole. Dennis Rader will die behind bars. He is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas, held in isolation. The impact on his family was catastrophic. His wife was granted an emergency divorce, and his children were left to grapple with the horrific truth. The community of Wichita was forced into a similar reckoning. The evil they had feared was not an outsider, but one of their own. Even behind bars, Rader still seems to crave the spotlight, corresponding with journalists, and his name has surfaced in speculation about other cold cases. The story of BTK is a terrifying reminder that the most monstrous evil can hide behind the most ordinary of faces. The reign of BTK is over, but the question his double life raises about the nature of evil will echo forever. The story of the BTK killer is a complex and disturbing journey into the mind of a predator. If you found this investigation compelling, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the cases that have shaped criminal history, and press the notification bell so you never miss an episode. For 30 years, Dennis Rader was a ghost who signed his work with 3 terrifying letters. BTK, he was a walking paradox, a man who destroyed families, a church leader who was the embodiment of evil, and a meticulous planner whose own arrogance led to his downfall. He is a story of profound manipulation, not only of his victims, but of an entire community he deceived for decades. The capture of the BTK killer was a triumph of persistence and clever police work, but his legacy is a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles, shakes hands, and lives right next door, hidden in plain sight.